as promised, we are back with part 2 with Kat and Amos. If you didn't listen to the podcast 2 weeks ago, please do so, or this is really not going to make a lot of sense. So my name's Lindsay, by the way, and as a family, we are particularly interested in putting topics and subjects out there where people who maybe have been put off Christianity or Jesus because of the views that they have heard or experiences that they may have had that may have been negative, ongoing questions because of what's going on in the world. And one of those things has been the perception that Donald Trump and the views of his party basically pretty much represents Christianity. And so we invited Kat and Amos, who I don't think I said actually 2 weeks ago are our nephews and niece-in-law, and they're staying with us in Spain right now. And so we've just broken up this podcast into 2 parts. So this is part 2. So you're very welcome. So Kat and Amos, we continue. The question I would like to ask you this time is, if I can find it, why do you think I know you weren't among this group, but why do you think that such a large proportion of American Christians did vote for Donald Trump?
Yeah. So we've spent a lot of time kind of trying to think about this in our own, just like between the two of us, of like, why do we think that there is such this huge gap in values, in the execution of those values, of our brothers and sisters in our faith, when we landed on a very different approach, a very different answer when it came to the 2024 election. And I think I don't know, maybe you're behind this, but I think I kind of came to the conclusion that there's like 3 categories of American Christian voters. There's got to be more nuance than this, but this is my like butcher knife of
just chopping them up.
Yeah. Go with that.
Somebody can go in with the scalpel later, but but there's kind of 3 categories that I can see. And the first one is like the MAGA supporters. They wear the hat. They are for Trump. They believe that he is God's man, and that they are like the for Trump folk. We can talk a little bit more about that mindset. But the second category is the business as usual folk, who just kind of believe that like they're voting on the Republican side of the line, just voting Republican down the ballot, kind of regardless of who the candidate is, because they believe that the Republican Party is the one that represents their values the closest that it can.
Mm-hmm. Which was you a few years ago. You said in podcast 1.
Yeah, that was definitely me, a decade or so ago. And that was just kind of like, that was my belief, is that the Republican Party represents me the best, regardless of who the candidate is. And so even if Trump is a buffoon and a jerk online, it's going to be business as usual for the politics. So that's the second category that I feel like I can see. And then the third category, I think we kind of fall into, which is we believed what Trump said when he said it, and we believed his actions when he acted it, which is very hateful and very divisive and very, go ahead and add in, but essentially my characterization, the way that I have always felt about Trump, is the guy that hits on you. If you're a cute girl, a guy hits on you at a bar, and when you reject him, even if you reject him kindly, and then he calls you a dumb ugly bee afterwards, it's like, well, you didn't think I was dumb or ugly or that until I rejected you. Mm-hmm. Right? That's like been my perspective of Trump the entire time, is that he is that person as a presidential candidate.
And to clarify, because the question is, why do you think people voted for him? And so that third group that you said...
Oh, yeah, they didn't vote for him. I'm talking about the American Christian voters, that there's 3 categories.
Right.
I see. Okay.
So that there's those who voted for him and are true supporters, those who voted for him as business as usual supporters, mm-hmm. and then those who didn't vote for him.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. Okay. Those are the 3 categories.
And I'm sure there's lots of people in between, lots of people who do hold nuanced views, people who may have voted for him.
Butcher knife.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that like the 2016 election versus the 2020 election versus the 2024 elections were radically different elections with different levels of understanding about who Trump would be as a political official and what would be done and what wouldn't be done and what lines would or would not be crossed. And I think that there's a lot of different reasons that people may or may not have voted. Even someone who voted all 3 times might have had very different reasons each time for voting, because those have been so different. And so I think that we're probably going to talk about the things that are more recent. Do you
Yeah.
think? Yeah. Just because I think that that's the most helpful in terms that we are in the time that we're in. And so, it's 2025 now. So
Yep.
the 2024 election cycle was the most recent. And so probably you managing that. Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah. So I do think that there are a lot of people who believe what Trump says, and they believe what Trump wants them to believe. They believe the propaganda put out by his team, and propaganda not in a derogatory way. I think that most things that most politicians put out through their PR,
Everything is propaganda.
It's all propaganda for sure. Every candidate has their propaganda, and every news cycle is its own propaganda for sure.
That is worth clarifying, though, because you do hear people that feel that one
Yeah,
side is all truth and it's all the other that's
Yeah,
propaganda. It's like,
I don't think his stuff is propaganda and other people's stuff isn't. It's
Yeah.
they're all trying to make me think something.
yes,
Yeah. But Trump is down for he sells Bibles and he makes claims about being a Christian, even though he, in the same interview that he claims to read the Bible every day, he, could never go so far as to quote one of the passages, and he, will put effort into being in a photo op in front of a historic church holding up a Bible, because that's the persona that he wants to push out there, and that is the thing that some supporters see, and they don't necessarily see that, like, oh, he gassed a number of protesters, including the minister of the church that he was looking to take a photo in front of, in order to clear them out so that he could take his photo opportunity there as president, and that's not a recent thing, but there are people who do see that media, and they do see that presence, and they do see those claims from Trump and from Trump's supporters and from Trump's staff, and say, yep, this is our person. Like, clearly this is God's person. He's selling Bibles, he's saying the things, and I think that if a person's view is as limited as just like that's what they've seen, that's what they know, and so that's what they think, I mean, it's hard to argue with it, right? Like, if they don't have other inputs. I think that same segment of people sometimes extends itself to people who the thing we hear a lot of is he says what we're all thinking. And I mean, my response is generally like, he says a lot of really despicable things. And if that's what you're all thinking, you have a lot of work in examining your heart to do, for sure. And none of us are perfect. I'm not pretending that I'm a perfect Christian, or that I have been 100% sanctified, or that I am, operating in a sinless life and world. We all need the workings of the Holy Spirit, as we progress through a journey, and everybody's spiritual life is a journey, and we all should be ideally growing and learning the entire time. And so that's not to say that we feel like we've reached a plateau that other people haven't.
But the fruits of the Spirit are evident in your guys' life. Gentleness, patience, goodness, love, self-control, kindness. You are growing in them. You may not be perfect, but you can at least, you're not just looking at a dead tree there. You can pick some fruits.
Trying it all. Trying.
And so there's definitely a segment that there are people that they don't like. There are people that they view as their enemy, and that might be different for different people. It might be the people who are coming to take their guns, or it might be the LGBTQIA plus people, or it might be
people that they view as like sinful or immoral or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever reason they have
foreigners
set up in their
and people with brown skin, and people hate any number of people for any number of reasons, but Donald Trump often in his rhetoric speaks to that hate, and there are people who like it, and there are people who like the way that it makes them feel, and
because
it's really tragic.
I think and I don't ever think it's useful to say people who think differently than me are either evil or stupid. Like that, I feel like that is that is often the way that it goes, is like, oh, well, I've studied this out and I've really thought about this, and so anybody who thinks differently than me must be either evil or dumb.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's true. And so if somebody thinks differently than me, I would like to try to understand what logic brought them there, what feelings brought them there.
Mm-hmm.
But for the people who are saying, well, Trump just says the quiet part out loud, Trump just says what the rest of us are thinking.
Mm-hmm. That would be
The rest
insulting
of
to
you-
you by the
the
It was like,
rest
is
of you-
that's what you're thinking?
The rest of you are objectifying women and talking about how nice it would be if you had a position of power in a pageant, that you were able to go and creep on them in the locker room while they were changing, or the rest of you are all thinking that we just hate these people who are brown or foreigners or gay or just live differently or in a different city than you and have slightly different political views.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it is really challenging to see that, because it's such a thing that's so difficult for me to really bridge the divide. There are people in my life that I love and care about who absolutely own memorabilia and display it proudly that says, you know, Trump 2020, make liberals cry again. And it's one thing to think that his political stances better reflect your own than the other party. It's another thing to, the main message from that is, I take pleasure in other people's suffering, and I like that this man makes the people I don't like suffer.
Mm-hmm.
I think they deserve to suffer.
Yeah.
Is the message that sends to me.
And it's unfortunate, because some of the people that do have that type of memorabilia call themselves Christians, and it's so difficult for me to see the light of Christ in any of that sentiment whatsoever. Right? That I mean, that may as well be a pagan graven idol in their
Love
home.
your enemy and do good to those who persecute you is not. Yeah, it doesn't immediately spring to mind as fitting that kind of attitude, does it?
Right.
And so it is important to acknowledge that, like, some people like the angry, hateful things that Trump says, and they like the way that it makes them feel, and those people are very real, and they are in our churches, and they are in our schools, and they are in our public offices, and they are in our workplaces, and they are our neighbors.
And I think that that's actually a pretty big minority. I think it's a minority.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that the majority of Christians are make liberals cry again, MAGA touters.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that is the majority. I think it is a very loud, obnoxious minority. And they are very loud and very obnoxious.
Certainly hope it's a minority.
Which is often the way with extreme views, isn't it? They are just loud, but it makes you feel like there's a lot more people that hold the view.
Well, because they're the ones who are willing to share, like, willing to be loud about it and willing to share that perspective. And then the kind of like second group, the business as usual voters who are just trying to vote their conscience based on, well, this party is usually the one that aligns with my primary values, and a lot of this really does come down to those like single issues that we mentioned in part one.
Abortion, gun control, LGBTQIA, sexual ethic type questions, and any number of other ones that people tend to really divide themselves on.
Yeah, like those are a lot of times the single issues that people tend to put themselves on one side of the ballot or the other because of. But I think that a lot of people who are in this like business as usual category are just trying to vote their conscience, not on the person, but on the policies.
Yeah.
And I think that is the majority. I think that is the majority of Christians that I know who voted for Trump, if I'm being honest.
Mm-hmm.
You certainly hope so.
Just based
on our own experiences with people in our own churches who, having had these discussions.
Who are good, loving people.
Generous and...
Who organize meal trains and who serve at the food kitchen and who are super involved in their church and taking care of people like that. They are good, loving people who are trying to do...
They want the world to be a better place. They want the world to reflect Jesus. Like, that's evident in some of these people's lives, for sure.
I guess the media, it's not as much fun, is it, to present that? So they want to bring the extreme over, I guess.
Rage bait sells clicks. Rage bait gets clicks, it gets views, it gets view time.
It sells advertisements, which is, that money's got to flow to someone.
And to be honest, I think because like you said on social media, which is so prevalent and so, well, not, I don't want to say important, but it's like supporters don't even have to say much because Donald Trump in that sense is very provocative, putting out a tweet like he did about Bruce Springsteen and all the stuff that he said about him. It's not even about supporters, it's about him himself sometimes saying some really, mean things. There's no way round that, is there? And that creates an extreme view when you've then got other people saying that's God's man, he's anointed, he's a Christian, and he's on a journey and he's being sanctified, and you shouldn't judge him. And it's like, okay, but you have seen quite a few years of his character already. He may be on a journey, and he may not be. Just because someone says that they are Christian, we can't say either way whether they are or not. All we are called to do is to judge a man by his fruits.
And we don't need that man who's on that journey to be leading our country. I think we've already talked about why we didn't vote for Trump, but that's my feeling.
Yeah. I might add another category, if it's okay for me to.
Working butcher knife theory.
I do think it's important to acknowledge that there are a lot of people who are attracted to the populist sentiments around government waste and corruption.
Yeah.
And that is a major selling point. I think this probably goes in probably that first category to an extent where people they are Trump's people, but I think that there's a lot of those people who don't view Trump as it's not about the morality of the person. It's not about the things. It's not even about the policies.
He's a means to an end.
There's a lot of people that feel really hopeless and helpless in the face of a system that they see as incompetent and wasteful and incapable. And so anyone who promises to fix that corruption and that incompetence is often how it's sold.
It's just like the Doge Elon Musk thing.
I think that there's a lot of people that really get excited about those ideas, and it's really challenging because if you just listen, if you are only listening to the propaganda from one side rather than the propaganda from all sides, that's the claim. That's the claim that people in that office are making right now, is that we are rooting out that waste and we're rooting out that corruption. We're getting rid of it. And it's hard because if you don't challenge those ideas and actually look at the receipts and see whether or not some of these things are actually wasteful or actually the abuse that is being claimed, and whether or not there's actually these people who are gaming the system and major elements of corruption, and you don't necessarily see. It's not all politics, and I think that probably is politics of its own, but sometimes it's not policy. It's about this desire to uproot the system because they see the system as hopeless.
I think there's I won't get sidetracked, but I think there is a similar view in the UK. On the old kind of things are changing in our landscape as well, based on the last by-elections. There's been very much that view too, that one particular side was more wasteful and couldn't be trusted to, even if they were given money, they just waste it all. And so I don't think that's an uncommon kind of perception, and that would be quite a strong motivator for some people to vote the other side because they feel they can trust them better with their money. But like you said, there's always two sides of that, how their money is used. May not be wasteful, but it could be used in other areas that you may or may not agree with. So it's complex, isn't it?
Cutting all the waste so that he can do tax hikes on the middle and lower classes, so that he can give tax cuts to the rich and the businesses. That'll work out great.
And then frame it in the way that they package it out to people in their version of the propaganda, that it will be on average an increase of however many thousands of dollars for the average American househout.
Even if the wide majority of those increases of income are actually only to the very, very most wealthy people.
That's been really hard to watch.
We don't have to get bogged down, but I think that is a large enough segment of the population where it's not moral issues of policy.
I think to me that fits in the second category, like the not business as usual as in we just want it to be the way that it's always been, but like this is the person who represents my interests regardless of who he is as a person.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I think we have heard that though, when you hear people here who know less because they're not in the country, but trying to put their own spin on why they think Trump's policies were popular. Apart from the single issue things we've discussed, we have heard people say, "Oh, Trump's great for the economy. You know, that's why we're voting for him." So what?
Minus tanking the stock market and making it very difficult for businesses to operate, and actually causing sectors that he claimed to be bolstering to ramp down production, not ramp up production because of the tariffs. We're not going to get into it. This is not about the policies. This is about, yeah. All right.
But
So-
that would be why some people voted for him. That helps
That
explain it.
is-
Some
yeah,
Christians
for
may
sure.
have had more faith in his economic policies, whatever. Yeah. How are you guys feeling about the next few years and being in the US?
I think for a lot of people, this feels like a time of almost paralyzing uncertainty.
Yeah.
I know people who, like, I'm friends with people who are like high achieving, high earning, capable people, physicians, you know, in the U.S. medical health, you know, the healthcare system, who technically are not citizens. They're here on a green card. They're married to an American citizen. They have American children, and you know, they immigrated here and went through the process and went through med school and these things, but are afraid
Really?
because the current administration has demonstrated that if you espouse publicly views that this administration is not happy with,
Or that is critical of the administration.
that they are not above taking people who have gone through the legitimate path and achieved those important things, and just taking them and throwing them away, and it's hard. And I mean, like, of
Their paperwork, you mean? Throwing away the documentation that gives
throwing
them,
away the document,
or
maybe,
the person.
or I mean,
because you can't say deported because they're not being deported because they're like
rightfully here.
So you
They're
mean
rightfully
getting
here.
rid of them?
Yeah.
black bagging them and disappearing them,
Right.
essentially.
Okay.
And
Putting them in.
and maybe some of that fear is hype, but I think some recent news stories show that it's not all hype, and that it's hard to know how far it's going to go. And even without that sort of thing, just the economic uncertainty, like we find ourselves where, you know, we are a single car household. I've had some changes in my career path recently where I'm finding myself commuting to work more often than working from home. And that makes it a little challenging because we're a single car household. And so, like, okay, do we need another car? Our children are getting older. Maybe it would be nice to have a vehicle that allows us to do some things. And trying to make decisions about something that shouldn't be that big of a deal. Like, if we can afford it and it's the time in our lives where it's necessary, we go and we buy the things that we need. But with the threat of these tariffs and creating economic rivals and even political enemies of longtime allies. I mean, like, why on earth are we creating animosity with Canada? That seems like just one of the most insane things to me.
Specifically with the auto industry.
Yeah.
Like,
and so we're looking at a decision like buying a car, and we're like, well, do we just buy it now because all of these prices are going to go up because of the tariffs? But if Trump always chickens out, the taco, you know, thing that's been going on, like, well, then maybe the tariffs won't be, but maybe the prices will have gone up anyway.
And then they'll just stay up because they were able to raise the prices and justify it with
They're not going to drop.
They're not
going to
drop them after that.
Right.
And yeah, there is a paralyzing amount of uncertainty when it comes to the economy
we
and
might need a car. Do we buy now? Do we buy it later? We know people who are looking to buy houses. Do they buy now? Do they buy later? Do they trust that the housing market is going to remain as it is? Do they believe it's going to go up based on any number of factors? And Trump, we
have friends who are affected by the government layoffs because of the Doge cuts, who are having to scramble and find new work and new careers because they got cut by Doge.
Yeah.
And like for a while that felt like fairy tales, like, oh, these crazy things are happening and these cuts are happening and Doge is like going in and slashing budgets and laying people off. And like at first, for the first couple of weeks, it felt like stories. And like, no, it's really people in our life.
Yeah.
Right.
It's really people we know and whose finances are now in shambles are tenuous because of it. And that is hard and that is scary. And like our ability to buy a car is like the least of the examples.
Because we're going to be okay either way. We can figure our lives out, but it's still like even a decision that, like, it's a big purchase, and it's something that we want to be careful and make the best decision we can about. But it's not life or death. But there are people who are having to deal with this with issues of livelihood and where they live and who their family is, and it is really frightening because you don't know how far it's going to go. You don't know if it's going to stay about the same. Is it going to get better? Is it going to get worse? And how do you make decisions? And if I'm having difficulty making decisions as a consumer and just a person who's trying to live my day-to-day life and do the best that I can with what I have, how much more difficult it is that people, I mean, like, I've talked to people who have small businesses who rely on imports, and how on earth are they supposed to run this business which their family relies on for their food, for their housing, for their school, for all of it, but they're having to buy products from these other countries because they are not made in the United States, and they don't know how much the products are going to cost when they arrive because they don't know what the tariff situation will be. And I don't know how on earth these businesses are supposed to operate. I know people who have temporarily closed down their business and are trying to find other ways of supporting their families while because we don't know what's happening with the tariffs, and they cannot be expected, because if they buy these materials that they need for their business at the wrong time and the tariffs are too high, and then they're gone in 2 weeks and their competitors buy everything there, well, then their business is gone.
Yeah. Would you say that the whole tariff situation, did that come as a shock to Americans in general? Do you think, regardless of which party they voted for?
Because Trump was talking about doing tariffs before he got elected. He's been promising the whole time. Yeah, he's been promising / threatening to do the tariffs the entire election cycle. And I think that was one of the things that people were like, that's just Trump being Trump. Right, like, he's just saying crazy things. He's going to get elected, and it's going to be business as usual.
Every economist knows that would destroy our economy.
That would be crazy.
No, there's no way he's serious about that. He must know that would be absolutely destructive to our economy and our position in the world as an economy.
And now it's actually happening, and we have all of this chaos of the of the tariffs being applied and then drawn back and then applied and drawn back, and it's causing a lot of chaos. It's causing a lot of chaos. There's going to be, this is a really anecdotal example, but we are going to an event at the end of August. It's like a dance training. We do a lot of dancing, and there was like a caveat on the payment. It was like we had to put down a payment, for the event. And they're like, we expect the price to be X amount, barring any hyperinflation. And so there was actually like a caveat in an event that we signed up for that was like, we think this is how much it's going to cost unless the economy explodes, and then it might be more than that, in which case we might not see you. But it was interesting that was like a real part of an actual thing that I signed up for, was barring hyperinflation.
Of a rather mundane purchase. Signing up for that is not very different than reserving a hotel. And could you imagine, is that going to be a part of all of the waivers and acknowledgements that we just click away?
When you arrive, you're still going to owe us extra money.
Oh, yes, it's going to be $155 a night for this hotel stay, and then buried there in the fine print, unless there's hyperinflation and these certain critical conditions are met, in which case it will be 4 or 5 times that. Right. And
you just wouldn't have expected that, would you? It's not really a laughing matter. I don't mean to laugh.
Oh no,
it's serious, isn't it?
You laugh kind because silly. You're gonna laugh or you're gonna cry. So in the moment, I'm laughing right now, but I'll cry about it later, probably.
Yeah.
I think it'll probably be okay.
I hope so.
And these are just the economic concerns, because there's also major concerns about the way that law enforcement and courts and legislation are changing things. Just the idea that the Trump administration is even talking about suspending habeas corpus, which is it relates to the right to, I'm arrested by the police and I have a right as an American, because of habeas corpus, to be charged with an actual crime and to appear before a judge, and for that judge to rule as to whether or not my detention and arrest is justified and lawful.
Okay.
And so without that, if it is suspended,
is habeas corpus predicated on being a citizen? It's not.
Not that. Oh boy, I'm not a legal scholar.
I don't think it is. I certainly
I don't
Sorry, keep
believe
going,
it.
keep going.
Sorry, carry on.
I'm pretty sure that the Supreme Court has ruled that those certain legal protections and the right to have a trial and to have due process is not predicated on citizenship. But I don't pretend to be an expert on that issue. But we have very real words, and maybe they'll just be words. Maybe it won't happen, but a lot of things I never thought would happen have happened. And so maybe the police and the court system in the United States will gain the right to arrest me or someone I love or people I love just because they're also a part of humanity, and not charge them with crimes and not take them to court and just detain them because you can.
So he's spoken about overthrowing that protection.
Yeah. And I mean, it's been done before. Abraham Lincoln famously suspended habeas corpus during the Civil War, and I view that as a massive black mark on that conflict and on his leadership. Like, that's a terrible thing. I think that goes wildly against the justice and the liberty that we all that we believe, that the America we grew up being taught to love should be striving for. Like the America that I was taught about in my own, high school civics class is definitely one that strives for being just and fair and valuing liberty and personal rights. But I don't. And so maybe it's just talk, and maybe it won't happen. But the idea that we're even flirting with that line feels crazy to me.
Yeah.
And
I think that is the surreal nature of the first few months, isn't it? It's like you said, so many things that were talked about that you didn't think would actually happen have happened. So then when you hear all the next round, you're less likely to go, oh, that won't happen, because it might. And that must be really unsettling and create a real sense of instability and fear even. Yeah.
A lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of embarrassment, if I'm being honest. Embarrassment. I'm embarrassed for my country.
And ideally, there's definitely a big part of me that just how far can it really go? It'll be okay. Yeah. It'll probably, it's not going to be okay for everybody, but the pendulum is swinging. There've got to be some checks and balances in play, and we got to be able to pull that pendulum back. But I don't know that for sure.
Because the Supreme Court, I'll get it wrong if I try and go into the details, but there doesn't seem to be the ability to, at the moment, to pull the president back when he has gone against Supreme Court rulings, right?
Right. Maybe we were talking about this in part 1, but that feeling of what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
What the executive branch is doing, and then essentially looking around at the other branches of government and saying, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
We just slashed all of your funding that Congress is supposed to be in charge of allocating. What are you going to do about it? You gave a judicial order for us to stop doing something. That's cute. We're not going to stop. What are you going to do about it?
Is there someone that can, it's just kind of to finish off, is there somebody in the way things are set up in America that can do something about it? Because the impression here is that he's getting away with illegal stuff. I'm not talking about his supporters might not say that, but what does come across to a degree is he's getting away with stuff and can't be stopped.
And it is challenging because in the system, as I was taught to understand it, because we all took high school classes where we were supposed to learn about how our system works.
Civics classes.
But the way that it's been taught to me, and as far as I've been able to learn about it, the executive branch where Trump sits in power is supposed to be the enforcement mechanism of everything else.
Right.
And so if that enforcement side of the government just decides it's going to start enforcing its own ideas, and it will not enforce the powers and the orders of the other parts of government that are supposed to keep it in check and supposed to balance its power, it's not entirely clear what happens next.
Yeah, it's not clear. We don't know what happens if the executive branch is just ignoring
And
rulings from the judicial branch.
and again,
Right.
I don't claim to be a scholar and expert on these types of civic issues, and there's a lot of nuance to exactly who can do what. And oh, I guess Congress could impeach, but what if the president just decides he's not impeached? Then what happens, right? And that's the question we're running up against.
Yeah.
Right? And questions we
Don't have answers to.
the system is kind of, I don't think a lot as many of us realized it as we do now, but the system really
depends on everybody playing by the rules.
or at least trying to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe stretching the rules, maybe changing the rules,
Trying to expand the rules in their favor.
but at least pretending like they're playing by the same set of rules.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is really, really helpful to get your perspective, guys, as people on the ground. And we really appreciate you being willing to be honest and open, knowing that some of your friends and family will listen to this podcast and won't agree. So thank you for being willing to put yourselves out there, because I know that's really tough. I feel it every time I do a podcast and I'm speaking personally. It's not easy. So bless you for that. And we hope, along with you, that, as you say, it will be okay and it will not get more extreme. But yeah, we really value that. Is there anything, just before we close, that I would hate to like end it if you're sitting there thinking, oh, I really wish that I just said this or just made this point before we wrap up?
If it's okay for me to
Well,
do
I
this.
would like to do one too, so you can go first.
Yeah, I mean, we don't believe that everybody gets to live in a country that has an ideal way of operating, and there's a lot of Christians throughout history that have had to live in times and in places of hardship, and I believe it's important to see that part of what it means to be a Christian, and to understand that that's like, the Bible doesn't make promises that this is going to be easy or it's going to be fun or it's all going to work out the way that you want it to, and that if things don't go our way, it doesn't mean that Jesus lost, or that the promises, in Scripture have returned void in some way, and that we are still called to care about and pray for our leadership and the people that we live with, and the nation as a whole, and the world as a whole, and that's the sentiments of feeling to a degree pessimistic and to be feeling apprehensive about the things that are happening do not mean that we don't care and that we don't pray for the leadership. I'm not necessarily praying that Donald Trump gets everything that he wants, but it is important to be people that want good things, and that pray for and speak out for those good things, and that we care about, that we still believe in the sovereignty of God. We still believe that we live in a world that is made by and run by a loving creator, and that we do not believe that we should be hopeless, because our hope is not in these institutions.
Right. Amen to that. Yeah.
I think the thing that I would want to kind of like end with and add is that in all of this discussion about like why we didn't vote for Trump, why we think people did, all of that, my faith in God and my faith in Jesus, I believe, calls me to love people. And I think that a lot of times people try to say, well, I am loving them by enforcing this value of mine. And I would really call any Christians who feel like they are loving people by forcing their values onto them to do some self-introspection about whether that is love or whether that is pride. Because if you feel like you are constantly in a position of righteous anger, and that you are constantly in the position of flipping the tables in the temple, and don't always find yourself in the position of feeding the hungry and clothing the naked and eating dinner with tax collectors and prostitutes, proverbially speaking.
Yeah.
Or literally speaking. It's very literally speaking.
Someone's got to work for the IRS, and I should be willing to have dinner with them.
That is important to self-reflect on in our values and in what I think the New Testament has called us to do and to be as Christians, and the way that we choose to love people or to love people.
Yeah, amen to that too. Well, thank you for that, guys. Really appreciate it. That's a really great place to end part 2, I think. I wish you could be around and live here so we could do many more podcasts with you, but
how about that?
Hopefully not too long a time before we can do it again.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening, guys. And again, just to reiterate that as a podcast, the reason we always kind of want to bring more than one side of an argument, but because there's been so much kind of a majority view coming over that Christianity equates to Donald Trump and the Republican right, we felt it was okay to bring a different perspective. You are the 2 out of 10 or 3 out of 10 that didn't vote, and that's why we've done this. So we're not trying to offend anyone or be deliberately provocative. We just thought it was good to bring some balance there, because we do know a lot of people in the UK do also have questions about how all that works. So that was really helpful. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And as I've said before, we do have a community, a Facebook community called Our Home. Our Home community. So feel free to connect with us there, and we will look forward to seeing you, speaking with you again in a couple of weeks. God bless.